Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Papillion La Vista Community Schools Board of Education meeting for November 28th, 2022. Section 1, call to order. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you all. Roll call, please. Here.
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 Here. Present.
Here.
Thank you. I'd like to give notice to the open meetings law that is at the entrance of our boardroom. All right, moving on to Section 2 communications. Item A, our military advisory. Colonel Cooley could not make it this evening, so instead we have Miss Nikki Nader. Welcome.
Thank you, everyone. So thank you for inviting us. Colonel Cooley sends his apologies. He is quite under the weather. Had that little virus that's been going around. So the update from Offutt is we are completely returned from Lincoln. Everything is done in Lincoln, and we're very happy about that. Also, the weather has, as you know, we haven't had a lot of snow or rain this year, so construction continues, or should I say reconstruction continues from all the flood recovery. So we're enjoying this longer construction season, and we've gotten a good bit more done. We have a few more contracts, very large contracts for buildings that will get awarded over the winter. And hopefully we'll get mobilization from those contracts to have even more buildings going up by the summer. We wanted to give a thank you to Papillion La Vista for your Veterans Day activities. We were aware of Patriot Elementary and the interviews they did with the veterans for the different curriculum writing. That was really neat. And then also how Prairie Queen hosted the Veterans Day breakfast, and we're always just so appreciative of the awareness you give to our veterans community. Let's see, also, in case you haven't heard, we do have a tree lighting ceremony that's going to be on December 1st over at our youth programs off of 25th Street. So we'll have the tree lighting ceremony at 5 p.m. Santa and Mrs. Claus is going to arrive. There's going to be pictures in our Elf Mart, our famous Elf Mart, where all the children get to go shopping. So it'll be a really big event. It is free for all DoD ID holders, but we do ask that you sign up and register to attend. Registration is a bit limited, but when I say limited, think in the hundreds, so not that limited. Let's see, and I think that's about all the update I have, unless you have any questions for me.
Thank you for being here tonight, Nikki, and hopefully the Colonel is feeling better soon. So we're aware that the runway is fully operational, but is there any punch list type of items where the Air Force is working with its contractors to continue to finish up work, or is the work by and large completed?
There are a few items left. It's pretty transparent to normal operations. Our day-to-day flying, it's not being affected at all. There's just some things to do with some painting and some landscaping and vegetation around the runway. So technically that contract doesn't close out. I think it's until March 1st. Yeah. So that's it.
So I can't tell you the number of phone calls I've gotten from friends and neighbors and everybody because of all the planes, and they're like, oh my gosh, what is that? What's going on? What's happening? It's amazing how quickly everybody forgets what planes sound like going ahead. So I can't even imagine the number of phone calls that are coming into the base with people losing their minds. But it's great. I enjoy it. I like looking up and seeing the planes fly over. So.
It's funny you bring that up, because now that our runway is open, you might have seen some different aircraft than maybe you've seen in the past. We had a group of fighter aircraft that came out of Mountain Home the other week, and I think they just wanted to come see the new runway and have some lunch. And they do that to do cross countries, and they get to train. It's good training for them. So we got a few phone calls. People thought maybe, right. No, there was not a balloon going up in any way. It was just training is all it was. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for the update. All right, moving on to item B under Section 2 Communications, our recognitions for this evening. I'll turn it over to Dr. Rickley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lotus, members of the board. As the community and the board is well aware, we try to spend a few minutes at least once a month, if not every board meeting, in recognizing students and staff who have exemplified themselves in an outstanding way. And we've had a really great list leading up to tonight, and tonight we will continue that. We're doing something we haven't done in the past, and that is recognizing all-state band and chorus. And one of the rationales behind this was it's easy to recognize the state championship, this, that, the award-winning teacher that wins a state or national award, and those are all really important things. But one of the things we really want to make sure that we're also highlighting is the fine arts, and I think we've done an admirable job of that, but as with all things, we can always do better. So just a little bit of a lead-in before Chantel shares some of the slides. Our 3 combined middle schools sent 18 individual students to all-state band, an incredible honor. 5 more went to all-state chorus. With these 18 students who were selected, this is the largest group that Papillion-La Vista Community Schools has ever sent from the middle school level. And this is to the Nebraska State Bandmasters, the NSBA Association, which does the 8th grade all-state jazz and concert band. We had 5 students from Papillion Middle School who were also selected for the Nebraska All-State Middle Level Chorus. So when you add them all up, you had 5 band students from La Vista Middle School, you had 7 band students from Liberty Middle School, and then from Papillion Middle School, we had 6 band, 5 representing chorus. This is an outstanding accomplishment, and as this board and maybe members of the community may know, I wasn't much of an athlete myself, but I did play a mean trombone, so I do have a special place in my heart for these students. So even though they're not here this evening with any luck at all, their families, these students are watching at home via YouTube. Congratulations from your efforts, and could we please have a round of applause from our community and Board of Education. Outstanding job. Moving on to our 2 high schools, we had 42 combined students from Monarch and Titan that were named All-State Band and Chorus. From Monarch, we had 15 total, 7 from band, 8 from choir. From Papillion-La Vista South, we had 27 total, 15 from band, 12 from choir. Again, this is an incredibly high honor. These students put in an extraordinary amount of work and time, not only during the school day, but during camps, before school, after school. Frankly, it's no significant difference in terms of the investment of time than what you would see at the highest level of athletics or any other activity. So extremely proud of our Monarch and Titan students. Again, hopefully you're watching from home. Please be recognized by your community and Board of Education. So to all of our band and choral teachers, wonderful job. We're so very proud of your efforts. We know that any form of coaching or activity sponsorship is a tremendous investment of time and effort, and we're extremely proud of the success that you've had. We will do this on an annual basis moving forward. And with that, Mr. Lotus, I would conclude our recognitions for the evening.
Great, thank you, Dr. Rickley. All right, moving on to item C, our public comment for items not on tonight's agenda. Again, when called upon, please come to the desk with the microphone. I will ask to give your name and address for the record. Individuals may not exceed 3 minutes, and a total time for all individuals who want to speak shall not exceed 30 minutes unless a majority of the board votes to extend allocated time. Again, Ms. Branco has the timer. First beeps are at 2 minutes and 15 seconds with those final beeps at 3 minutes. First up this evening for public comments for items not on tonight's agenda, Mr. Mike Erdman. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Mike Erdman, 926 South Madison Street, Papillion. Wasn't sure if I'd make any December meetings, so I wanted to come tonight to be sure that I said some kind words about Dr. Trefoya. I think you deserve all the comments that I'll make tonight. You've been a great leader for our community as well as the school district, so I just want to say, as you begin a new chapter, I and many others want to thank you for your leadership and dedication to our community as a civic leader and as a respected school board member for so many years. Your positive impact on our community and the school is truly immeasurable, Dr. Tafoya. As a school board member, for 2 decades, you've guided us to greatness. You helped us navigate a 50% increase in student population, the completion of a new high school, a new middle school, several new elementary schools, and the needed improvements to our existing schools to keep them thriving. The district now also attracts the best teachers and educators, which is indicated by the filling of all teacher openings, I believe, before the school started, while other districts still struggle. You also helped set the master plan and the blueprint for our district. You have overseen bond money wisely spent and invested in our community's growth, including the purchase of land for new schools and facilities expansion as we continue to grow. Cities like Papillion don't get voted consistently as one of the top 10 places to live in America without a solid and respected school system. And for most families attracted to Papillion, the schools are the primary reason to locate here. That says a lot about the district and your leadership on this board, sir. I find it very appropriate that our district's motto is be known for greatness, as you exemplify just that. There are only a handful of individuals in our great city that has served our community for so well for so long. So my hope, along with many others, is that you will continue to serve our community in other ways as we still need your leadership and dedication. So thank you again for your leadership on the school board to make the district the best in the state. And thank you for your vision for what a community should be. The world needs more leaders like you, good sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up for public comments on items not on tonight's agenda, Ms. Lorene Renate. Welcome.
Good evening. Lorene Renante, 1108 Park Drive, Papillion. My comments are regarding Skip Bailey's comments from the November 14th, 2022 board meeting. It was stunning, to say the least, that Mr. Bailey chose to use the word grooming. Words have meaning, so I looked up that meaning on the Merriam-Webster website. There are 3 definitions. 1, to clean and maintain the appearance of an animal, especially to maintain the health and condition of the coat, a horse, dog, etc., by brushing, combing, currying, or similar attention. Definition number 2, to make neat or attractive. And then definition number 3, to get into readiness for a specific objective. I used to give people the benefit of the doubt, but I'm not so sure these days, as people really know what they are doing and saying because they have an agenda. The word, in my opinion, that should have been used was manners. But manners would not have been the shock word that Mr. Bailey was going for. First, his intent was to disparage Ms. Holtmeyer. It was very clear to all of us. Mr. Bailey's words were, and I quote, "We get some people out here talking about our children getting groomed." Then he stated, "I saw them getting groomed." And then to paraphrase what was told to the students by Ms. Thompson, they were to be safe, responsible, respectful, and kind. Those are manners. Manners come from home. School may reinforce manners. Then Mr. Bailey stated, if that is the kind of grooming, then I'm all for it. That makes good students. For a sitting board member to use an inappropriate word, in my opinion, is stunning. As for the election comment made by Mr. Bailey, that was also inappropriate, in my opinion, that you were disappointed by the outcome. The voters spoke, and they spoke loudly. And one other thing. I am damn proud of my father and family. My father and mother were part of the greatest generation. My father was a 3-war veteran, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. He was a pilot. Some of the planes he flew, the C-47, C-45, C-9, F-90, and his favorite, the P-51 Mustang. I get it. This area is full of veterans. My father used to run base ops at Offutt back in the day. But typically veterans are quiet and not boastful about their service to our nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up for public comment for items not on tonight's agenda, Ms. Brittany Holtmeyer.
Hi.
Welcome.
Brittany Holtmeyer, 2007 Ridgewood Drive. What are behaviors of grooming? Grooming is the process during which a child sexual offender draws a child in by gaining his or her trust in order to sexually abuse a child and maintain secrecy. The offender may also groom the parents by persuading them of his or her trustworthiness with children. The relationship of a groomer builds can take different forms. This could be a romantic relationship as a mentor, an authority figure, or a dominant and persistent figure. So if we are talking about grooming, I'd say this is indeed going on within the schools. You have parents receiving emails saying that their junior high child will learn about teenage pressures, sexting, and human trafficking. Yet a child comes home that day after school and tells their parents that they learned of oral sex. When the parent called the school, they were told that they want the kids to feel that school is a safe space, as they will hear and learn about it on social media with their smartphones. And this is not the case, and it's not an excuse. Not every child has a smartphone. To have a child in a counselor's office without parent knowledge telling the child that they need to accept the fact that another sex is using a restroom, where's the parents? To hear at school board conference of a presentation that was put on by a law firm, every kid knows of porn sites and views them on their phones, yet you have parents coming to school board meetings complaining of books in the libraries. And there were 2 people in there within the district who were laughing at the comment. It is quite disgusting. Another type of grooming, having a child go to a counselor office saying to keep a secret from their parent that they don't want them to know that they go by a pronoun or if they feel that they're opposite sex. Does this counselor have to tell the parent? Him saying no, and the other people within the district agreeing with him. The schools are not the parents. We have had our fair share of kept secrets within the districts and teachers having sexual relationships with students. That gets swept under the rug and they resign. You have had a teacher fired under the first grooming statute. This is an open door, and for someone on the board to mock about grooming, especially as a board member, it's quite disturbing. Does this happen with all teachers? No. Do parents need to be informed of what is actually being taught to their kids? Yes. They are the parent, not the district. And like I said last time, after sharing my speech about the books that are available to these children, you do have quite a few upset parents, grandparents, and tax-paying citizens. And I'm sorry that the election didn't go as planned, Mr. Bailey, with the hand gesture to Dr. Tafoya. You being disappointed and expressing it, you're disappointing in 9,688 voters. Voters are now aware, awake, and they're ready to take over each of the spots as the next election arises. So let me remind you, as a board member, you work for the people. And if you're here to mock and laugh at constituents' comments, then you have no right to sit on the board. If you're not going to listen or even try to help, then why do we have a board? Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes item C, public comment for items not on tonight's agenda. Moving on to item D, our superintendent's report. Dr. Rickley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lotus, members of the board. For those watching at home on YouTube, as well as those who are with us this evening, thank you for being here. Thank you for being engaged with your school district and your Board of Education. Wanted to welcome everybody back from what hopefully was a nice, enjoyable Thanksgiving break. Our teachers reported, for the most part, for professional learning on Wednesday, but students were off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, long weekend. Hopefully, all of our families and staff were able to recharge the batteries a little bit and spend some quality time reflecting on all the blessings many of us have, all of us have, frankly. Winter break is just around the corner, of course, this week, next week, and the following week. We have 3 full weeks, and then students are off for another 2 weeks to celebrate the end of first semester and to celebrate the holiday season. Also wanted to remind the board and community we do have another community closet event coming up at December 10th at La Vista Middle School. This is the second community closet event in the last month. We've traditionally done it at La Vista Middle School because it does tend to be centrally located. Parking is good. Traffic flow is about as good as we're going to get at any of our buildings. And the focus will continue to be on summer clothing, winter clothing, winter apparel. We won't be worrying about summer for a bit here. Snow rolling in tonight. Gloves, hats, scarves, and most importantly, heavy winter jackets. I think I mentioned to the community and the board that at our last event at La Vista Middle School, we handed out approximately 600 jackets. My guess is we're going to see a comparable number of clothing items handed out on December 10th. So if you're interested, it is December 10th, La Vista Middle School from 10 a.m. to noon. Also wanted to thank the board for the State Ed Conference, which is traditionally held that week. Before Thanksgiving break, we had a number of board members. We had board member-elect Brittany Holtmeyer attend. We had some great breakout sessions. I thought some of the keynoters were very good, very inspirational. We got to network with educational leaders, board members specifically from all across the state. It's always a great opportunity to learn and break bread and do a little bit of networking. Speaking of, we do have a legislative update coming this Thursday. Mr. Richards and I will be in Lincoln doing the legislative preview conference where we'll meet with a number of state senators as well as hear about upcoming legislative priorities. The session starts the first week in January. The first 10 days are bill introduction, as is customary. Mr. Richards and I have met with a number of senators already, including our own Senator Arch and Senator Sanders, and we'll have a couple other visits lined up in the coming weeks. But it will be legislative session before we know it. And in fact, former State Senator Tim Gay, who represents the district's interests, will be briefing the board in the coming weeks on everything from committee assignments to bills that have been introduced and things that we'll need to continue to monitor as a school district. Wanted to give an update on some of our building projects. It's been a couple of weeks. Papillion La Vista High School, rapidly approaching the end of that project. Liberty Middle School, which is undergoing significant expansion work, is slated to be done in April. And then our two elementary buildings, Rumsey Station and La Vista West, they're making fast progress there. We anticipate by the end of summer we'll have substantial completion at those buildings. That will bring the 2018 bond largely to conclusion. And speaking of the bond, we do not have anything on the agenda this evening regarding bond listening sessions. Up to this point, I think Ms. Iman has provided at least 3 different briefings to the community and the board on the data collected from the 2 community forums, one at Monarch, one at Titan, as well as our staff and our building level listening sessions. Those are completed now. We have hit every building at least once, and in some cases we've hit multiple times doing both staff as well as parents. So our next step for the community, so that you're kind of in the loop in terms of what we're doing, we plan on doing a formal survey. We'll work almost certainly with an outside firm that specializes in doing that. We'll have a few strategic questions to gauge the level of interest and the level of potential support, and then we'll pull all that information together along with the listening session data, present that to the board after the new year, and we'll have a decision to make in terms of whether to proceed with the bond or whether if the timing is just not right. So more information to come. And with that, Mr. Lotus, I would conclude my superintendent's comments for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Rickley. Moving on to board comments for this evening.
Too proud of me. After 4 years, I finally learned to do that.
And now they're just messing with you, Dr. Toya.
I think during these last 2 weeks, I have been to teammates. Teammates was impacted very negatively because of, COVID. COVID has affected our whole community, no matter what aspect it is. And they are now in the building process. They're looking for mentors, and they would like to get up to 100 right now. They have half of that right now. There is a big need, and so anyone that would like to help out in that regard, they would really appreciate it. The second thing I went to was the Wellness Committee. The Wellness Committee, once again, is spending a lot of time with the mental health, and they are making decisions that are impacting positively the outcome of mental health, and so that is a group. The third thing I did go to is the legislative session, not the legislative, the and Nebraska School Board Association conference, and I couldn't add any more than what Dr. Rickley said. It was very, very professional, very, very knowledgeable, and it's always great to be able to associate with the other board members from other districts, and over the years I have made a number of friends, and so it was nice to see them. But that's it.
I'd just like to say I got invited to Rumsey Station a couple days before Thanksgiving by their staff and their teachers for their feast. Didn't know what to expect with the invitation, but it was fantastic. All the teachers brought in a whole bunch of different food, and as they came in to eat at different times and everything like they do with the days on lunches, and I just kind of stayed there for as long as I could before I had to get back to work, but just kind of talked to the teachers, ate some really good food, so I had a couple different Thanksgiving meals there, but really great to talk to them. I know they're really anxious to get their construction out of the way. As we all know, in every school that has a construction, I think I asked them how the students were faring, and I think at this point they said when the construction stops, they may have more issue because the students will probably wonder why it got so quiet. But no, it was great talking to the teachers. We have, I mean, as I've said before, every school I've been to, and even the ones I haven't, I know we have some fantastic teachers, and they're doing some great things out there with our students. So it was really nice to go and do that a couple days before Thanksgiving. So if anybody from Rumsey Station is listening, I really appreciate the invite. I had a great time.
We had a Pavilion Vista Community Schools Foundation meeting last week in which Dr. Rickley did the usual bond proposal overview for that, for the Foundation's Board of Directors, and I thought it was well received, had some good questions and some good back and forth in that meeting. Also, this was the first time I was able to go to the state conference. Last year I wasn't able to. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed all the sessions, the presentations, just to hear from others that are dealing with similar situations across the state, and listening to those that, it's their, some of the professionals where it is their day job of having to deal with these situations, and they know about a lot of these topics more than I do, and it was a great way for me to get more educated on a number of those issues. So I thought it was a great opportunity, and I thoroughly enjoyed spending the day with most of the everyone that could be there from this board as well. And we had enjoyed the Monarchs choir that was able to kick it off that morning in front of the 1,000 people, however many people were there. They had a good 30 minutes worth of singing in front of the whole conference, which was a great opportunity for them, and we were able to chat with them afterwards, and they got before they got to head back. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and hopefully next year I can also make the trip.
All right. Well, seeing no further board comments, I'll move on to committee reports. Building, Grounds, and Finance.
We have not met since last meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Tafoya. Human Resources and Student Services.
Human Resources continues to we did meet on our own for committee meeting, and then we've also met as part of the negotiation with the EA group. We continue to work towards our formalizing the contract for the next 2 years, and that's been a really positive experience in my opinion. We did meet on the superintendent's contract, and we worked on the 8,000 policy, which is on the agenda tonight for discussion. And let's see, I want to remind people that they want to make a difference, come work for PLCS. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Witt. And Curriculum and Americanism.
We have not met, although we do have an item on the agenda tonight that Ms. Siri is going to be sharing with all of us. Looking forward to that information.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. All right, that concludes Section 2 communications. Moving on to Section 3 action items. Our action by consent.
I should make a motion to approve the action by consent as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Fisher and a second by Dr. Tafoya. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you. Moving on to item B under Section 3 action items, the board meeting minutes of November 14th, 2022.
I'll make a motion to approve the board meeting minutes of November 14th, 2022 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Bailey and a second by Ms. Witt. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 All right, moving on to our final item under action items, item C, the 2021-2022 audit. Mr. Richards.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. Our audit of 21-22 is concluded. Our independent auditors of OFWF, Certified Public Accountants out of Omaha, came in here for a few weeks and spent multiple weeks outside the district as well, reviewing our financial statements. In general, they check for fraudulent activities, errors in statements, purchasing procedures, a lot of other processes and procedures in regards to the finances of the district. And then they give their opinions a little bit related to the district's financial management. This report is submitted to the Nebraska Department of Education and the state's auditor of public accounts and is required by law each year that the district does this. You'll find within the report, and you do have a hard copy tonight. You've got the electronic copies prior to. Hopefully you've had a chance to review it, but it was a good report in our financial statements. We're positioned as strong financially within the districts. There's no findings of material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. The district has shown compliance with state and federal programs and requirements, and no deficiencies in those areas were noted in the report either. That can be found on page 63 is kind of the final report there. Financial statements were prepared for each major fund associated with the district, including the general fund, special building, bond, depreciation, cooperative, school nutrition, and activity funds. The audit report also contains information related to the state of Nebraska's retirement plan, which is kind of interesting reading in there. And then the district's long-term bond debts as well. So those are two areas that it focuses on, both in good shape. A more detailed look at revenue and expenditures within the district's main operational fund, the general fund, is the one that most people pay attention to. That can be found on page 35. That's our big operations fund, the one we spend out of the most of the year. This year, and this is by design, the district had a revenue of $133,200,778 and expenditures of $133,049,949. That's a difference in the black of about $150,000 out of that big of a budget. So it's kind of a little bit of an art and science to try to get that at this point to come out fairly neutral between our revenue and expenditures at this time, now that our cash reserve has been built back up since the learning community, basically. We'll continue to try to do that practice. I appreciate the Buildings, Grounds, and Finance Committee being a big part of that, looking at our expected revenues and expenditures prior to us doing the budget to try to get that to balance out fairly correctly, the way we'd like to see that at the end. I would answer any questions you have. This audit report will be on our website as of tomorrow, so if people are interested in taking a look at that in the community, feel free to look under our website. It'll be very prominently displayed under business services for the folks to look at, and I'll take any questions you might have tonight on that.
I want to appreciate you and the team for working with the auditors and getting them everything they need for this. I know that's not an easy task.
It does take time.
Especially with all the different funds and all the different tracking that we have to do. But you talked about the no material weaknesses, and yeah, for those that want to look it up, that is on page 63. For findings to the financial statements, significant deficiency or material weaknesses identified, none. Non-compliance, none. Then the other big thing is that they also look at internal controls to make sure, like, okay, that even our processes are in place to make sure you don't have one person approving and cutting the checks, and they also have in here no deficiencies in internal controls were identified. So, no, I think that for all the different funds and all the different dollars that we have coming in and out, it's important that we prove to the public that everything is as of expected, and I think this audit shows that you and your team are doing a great job with it.
Thank you very much. And I just will point out the board is heavily involved in that through our budget grounds and finance committee. So you guys are giving us all the credit, but you're reviewing those monthly and helping set the budget, looking at the larger expenditures within the district. So very much appreciative of all your time and work too, Fred, Marcus, and Brian.
No, thank you, Mr. Richards. Audit is on an annual basis is no easy undertaking. As a former auditor, I'm probably the only one that will read this thing cover to cover. But again, as Mr. Madler said, your team does a phenomenal job being organized and following our policies and procedures that we have in place to ensure that we do have a clean annual audit. It's very important to me, especially to make sure that we're a proper fiduciary for our taxpayers. And on top of that, it shows a strong financial position for this district, and that we do take the budget very seriously and are monitoring, watching at all times to make sure that we're spending the money as intended each year. So, thank you.
I think Mr. Madler's point is really well taken. To run a $130 million general fund budget without any material findings and a review of our internal controls is pretty remarkable. The other thing that Mr. Richards touched on that I just think it's important that our community understand, and that is when I was hired in 2013, the board had prioritized rebuilding this district's cash reserve. Every year for the last 9 years, going on 10 years now, we have put something back into the cash reserve. That is, our revenues have outpaced our spending. That is remarkable. That is due in no small part to Mr. Lewis prior to Mr. Richards' outstanding leadership the last 2 years, and most of all, the board's fiscal stewardship. This district's budget is in very good shape thanks to their oversight. So, outstanding work, Brett.
I'll make the motion to acknowledge receipt of the audit report for fiscal year 2021 and 2022.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Madler, a second by Dr. Tafoya. Any board comments, questions? All right, see no public comment regarding this item on the agenda. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Thank you. All right, that concludes Section 3 action items. Moving on to Section 4, discussion and information items for this evening. Item A, the superintendent's evaluation and contract extension. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Settles.
Sure, thank you. So, as you're all aware, you have recently completed an evaluation for Dr. Rickley, and Mr. Lotus has met with Dr. Rickley to review the performance evaluation and shared your input, so thank you for that. This is something, just as a reminder, that the board has been doing in November, December, and reasons that boards do that is because of if the recommendation of the board is to move into a different direction, then it does allow the district and the existing superintendent a chance to do so and move on and get planning. So based on that recommendation from the board, and that is one of the questions that you are asked, the recommendation was to extend the 3-year contract on an additional year, which would be July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. At this time, all other provisions of the contract would remain the same.
Board comments, questions?
I do think it's important for people to know that the contract and information is on the website for people to see. But what I'd like to say is that being a superintendent is not an easy job. Being any administrator, teacher, any position in a school district is not an easy job. And there's no doubt that we've had some trying times over these past few years. But I will say that as a board member who's been through many superintendents, I appreciate that I can go to our superintendent, I can share concerns, we can have good conversations, and in the end, I believe the superintendent is doing the right thing to move this district forward. As was mentioned earlier, we don't have a teacher shortage problem here in this district, and part of that is because people like to come here, they like to work, and a lot of that comes from top down and from bottom up. It doesn't matter where you are in the district, there's always going to be some naysayers, whether it's in the public, whether it's in your staff, wherever it is. But I will say as a board member, I appreciate the hard work that you do for this district every day, the fact that you're out in the community, that people see you, that you're visible, that our teachers see you. It's nice that you're getting to do more of that now that we're not so limited during COVID times. But as this board member has had that experience, I will say that I proudly recommend this contract extension, and I appreciate having you as our superintendent as we continue to move forward, making one of this district not only one of the best in the state, but one of the best in the nation. That doesn't mean there isn't work to do. There's always work to do. But we take that work seriously, and we do a good job with it, and you do a good job leading us through our strategic goals and our planning. So thank you for what you're doing every day for this district, for our students, for our staff, and for the community.
I'd like to mention the fact that Dr. Rickley has reached out into the community. He has various groups that he meets with throughout the month and the year, whether it's students, whether it's teachers, or whatever business. He has all kinds of people coming in here, and he's telling them what the status of the school district is, and he's getting input from these different groups. And I don't remember seeing that to the extent that he has it from the other superintendents. And so I agree with you. He is an exceptional superintendent, and I do think we should keep him.
I just have to echo, but I can tell you that, 25 years in the military, and I've seen a lot of leaders, seen the good and the bad and everything. And granted, we're not in the military, but the traits that I see in you and what you're doing with this district, I have seen in the many good leaders that I have had throughout my career. I haven't been on the board as long as you all and haven't seen the other superintendents, but I can say that we have a good one. I think we're making the right decision to keep you, to hang on to you as long as we possibly can. I think you're doing fantastic, and I think you've had to lead the last couple of years that I've been on the board in some of the most trying times that I can remember in my lifetime. So appreciate what you do, and looking forward to continue to work with you.
Okay, I just have a few things, but nobody's perfect, and everybody makes mistakes. And I know that when you make a mistake, it weighs on you heavily, and you don't do it on purpose, and you try to find a way to correct it as soon as possible. You try to bring in everybody to make sure it doesn't happen again, and I appreciate that. I've worked with a lot of administrators in this state and in the country, and I've met a lot of superintendents, and I agree that you're one of the best that I've ever seen, and I appreciate that you have chosen Papillion and La Vista Community Schools to be your home. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for all of that, and that's pretty humbling. When this happens every year, I don't take this job for granted. I don't take this board for granted. I don't take this community for granted. I have made mistakes. I'll continue to make mistakes as long as I serve at the pleasure of this board and this community. When I make mistakes, I'm coming at it from a place of doing the best that we can with the information that we have. When you've entrusted me with this job, it's one that I take incredibly seriously because this is my career, but more importantly, I'm a father of 3 kids that have either gone through this system or are currently enrolled. the decisions we make here every night, every day, every week impact the single greatest asset that I own, and that is my children. So for whatever mistakes that have been made, hopefully they've been a good faith effort to serve our community. I'll continue to try to strive to do better, but I just hope you know that I certainly love working for this board and this community, and I will do so just as long as the community and the board wants me to. Thank you.
Nope, and I hope I didn't miss anybody last week sharing the results with all of you. Thank you again, board members, for your timely responses to the survey and your well worded and thoughtful comments as well. I was able to share those with Dr. Rickley last Tuesday at our regular meeting. So again, thank you for all of that. And if you had any other questions or feedback, please feel free to reach out. All right. That concludes item A under section 4, discussion and information items. Moving on to item B, back with Dr. Settles to discuss our 2023-2024 school calendar.
Thank you. Yes, you have in front of you the proposed calendar for 23-24, and I've got just some additional notes for you on that. So this does include 173 student days for elementary students, 175 student days for secondary students. It does retain those elementary to planning days, and you'll see those are strategically placed. The first day for our students next year would be August 10th, 2023 for K through 7 and 9th grade students, and that's a shortened day. And then the last day for students would be May 21st. Spring break is scheduled in there for March 11th through 15th, and winter break would begin December 20th through January 3rd for students. We've also outlined there with for the winter break, we've outlined the final exam days. And so they're right there before break. And I know it's kind of hard to tell when you look at the everything in black and white on there, but off to the side it does list the actual days. So for the high school in December, those would be December 15th, 18th, and 19th for our high school students, and then May 17th, 20th, and 21st. And I just share that for parent planning purposes. I know you're not voting on anything tonight, but I think it's important for people to notice that as they're looking at this if they are seeing a black and white version. This also includes inclement weather days for makeup days if needed. And again, that's something that the board would discuss if we got to that point. And I think we've only gotten to that point when it's been extremely excessive in the past. That would be May 22nd through 24th, but we do ask families to plan with those in mind that those could possibly end up having to be student days. The staff calendar would show 187 days according to this, and does not show those 3 days for parent-teacher conferences, which complete their 190-day calendar for staff. Those 3 days equate to 24 hours for conference time and planning purposes for parent-teacher conferences. Do you have any questions about this calendar? So we continue to look at this throughout this next month then, or until the next board meeting. So do let us know if you notice anything on there that might need to be clarified, as we hope to put out a perfect product the first time when we have this published out of draft form.
I appreciate the work that goes into this. People don't realize how difficult it is, especially as the days move, the dates and the days move, and then all of a sudden you're finding yourself going, now what do we do, because of the way the calendar is fitting into the work week or the school week. So I appreciate the effort that goes into it. We've already had a lot of juggling, so I'm with you. I hope the juggling is done and we're where we need to be with this calendar. But The good thing about it is that it is a calendar with some flexibility should something come up or we need to make some changes. But just want to thank you for the efforts, because it's never easy. You always think you're just going to carry the calendar from the year before, but it doesn't work that way because of the dates and the days. So thank you for the efforts that went into that.
I also want to thank you. I want to make sure, from Shireen's point of view, that there are enough days for kids in classrooms to meet the curriculum needs, because it's very important. I think there's two things our teachers, I'm making an assumption here, teachers, you tell me. One of the things is they want to be able to deliver the curriculum to their kids. They want to be in the classroom, but they also need time off, and they need those professional development days. So I think this calendar balances that, and I'm hoping that it meets the needs of both the students and our staff. Thank you.
One new day I'm seeing on here that I don't, maybe was on here this year, but I don't remember it. The November 1st, no elementary school. The day after Halloween, this year that was like that Friday, we had that as a day off, right?
Yeah. So, and that is, we're trying something a little different on that. There was a year recently that it did fall on a Friday or Monday. I can't remember which way that was, but it was very popular with people. In general, for those elementary planning days, we've tried having those on either a Monday or a Friday, so that in case families are wanting to take a long weekend. However, just really solicited some input this year and found that a lot of people thought this would be a good idea. So we thought we'll give this a try and see how it goes for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea, and see what sort of feedback we get. I mean, just every Halloween, when it is on a school night, you know, the families typically are doing something the night before. So yeah, it is. It'll be interesting what that feedback is of not having the elementary kids go to school the next day and getting a little bit more time to rest and not feel so rushed the night before with some of the activities, and for the teachers too, not having to have the kids in the building that day from their sugar hangover the next day. That'd be good.
Yeah, we hope it's popular with students, staff, and parents.
Yeah, perfect.
Any other board comments or questions? All right, seeing none and seeing no public comment requested for that agenda item, we'll move on, conclude item B and move on to item C. The Dr. Settles show continues with the policy 8000, board organization and operation.
Yep, Sue Ann mentioned that. We've been meeting for negotiations as well, and I think all of these items tonight show some thanks to all three of the HR Student Services Subcommittee. Thank you for all the extra time you've been putting in for all of these items. So this is another look at the 8000s, and as you know, these are typically up for review in the month of August. But knowing that in the month of August, things tend to fall by the wayside with everything else going on during that busy time of year, there were a number of policy and procedural changes. So we did take the extra time to look at them and have legal counsel review those as well and give some recommendations. So what you'll see here, many of those changes include some small grammatical types of changes, removal of redundancies that were in more than one policy, some renumbering of policies and procedures, as several of those then have been combined, and some disbanded if they are taken care of in a different policy, as well as some of the recommendations by legal counsel. So the online version, which I would encourage you to take a look at, does have redlined with any additions. And those you can kind of see here in the black and white version. They're a little bit lighter if they're in the redlined. But again, taking a look at them in color is probably a good idea as well. And we also have struck the items that did get needed to be striked on those. So, but HR subcommittee is still taking your feedback on these items, and we'll bring all a final recommendation to you at the next meeting. But we're happy to help answer anything at this point if needed.
I want to personally thank you for the work that you did and the whole team for reviewing. I know it was quite complicated to get through because we rearranged so many things, and that's what made it difficult, was because we tried to reorder things that into a sense, things that made sense. And I think when that happens and something that was in a different section got moved, it looked like, should I strike it out or just move it, or how do we take care of that? So I know it was complicated, but I think it looks good. We've done a great job. I think I would like to hear the feedback of the others after they've gone through it and see how they feel about it as well. But thank you so much for the time you've spent trying to get through this, especially during the contract period, and especially during all the other things you're working on.
Well, and likewise, Ms. Witt, Ms. Fisher, and Mr. Lotus, who are on the HR Student Services Subcommittee, have put in an enormous amount of work, not only in meeting with district officials, but outside reading recommendations, revisions, and amendments. This has been a heavy lift, but we've made some nice substantive cleanup to this policy. So thanks to our board members as well as Dr. Settles for your leadership. Good stuff.
Yeah, I know that, in past years reading through it, I just kind of took a look and said, well, yeah, we say the same thing, or, well, are we really doing it this way now, versus the way that things were either written or not written. And so in attending some of the, NASB workshops and things, and getting some of their feedback and some of the ideas that they had, that's why, it took us a while to review this. I really wanted to dig in and take a look if their recommendations make sense for our district versus some of the other districts out there. So again, a big thank you to the other subcommittee members and Dr. Settles, you and your team, for letting us make this make a little bit more sense. It just didn't flow right. Things were in one section, and then we talk about it 3 sections later or 8 pages later. It really just didn't flow properly, and there were a lot of redundancies that in the past I just ignored, and I think it was just the right time to make sure we have this cleaned up.
I read through all the changes when they sent them over, and I just want to say I'm thankful that we haven't had to go through this deep of policy changes on the finance committee. Haven't had to do this yet in depth. I think all the changes make sense. Talk about the redundancies. When I was reading through the initial policy, you'd have the same thing stated like 3 different times in 3 different parts of the policy, which, just to make it cleaner, even just to go back, if you'd ever change that, you wouldn't have to change it in 3 places, you just to change it in 1. So I think that makes sense. One suggestion from the 8420, and I can send this over as well, for the participation by citizens, and then the individual, the other handout for the public comments. One of the things we've heard in this meeting is a public comment about a topic, but then coming the next time and being like, what has been done regarding this? We have formal policies in place for complaints, or if for a number of different areas. If you want to have a formal complaint, you can make a formal complaint, but something maybe language to make sure that the public board comments are not going to take the place of a formal complaint through the existing policies that we have. Maybe just to clarify that, so that people don't think they can come here, make a comment, and then that takes away all the other process that they should go through for a formal complaint. One suggestion.
Any other board comments, questions, discussion? All right. Again, if you take a second read through, again, as Dr. Siddle stated, we are continuing to take feedback as thoroughly as we have all gone through this section. Again, we all make mistakes and may have missed something, or maybe there's an addition that somebody would like to make to either policy or procedures listed within the 8000 series. So please let any of us know, or Dr. Settles and her team, and we'll take note of it. All right. Seeing no further board comments and no public comment requested for this item, we will conclude item C and move on to item D, the option enrollment resolution. Is that Dr. Steele?
Yep, Dr. Steele up for this one.
Hiding around the corner on me again. Welcome, Dr. Steele.
Thank you. Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, the enrollment option program is established under Nebraska law to enable parents or guardians of any kindergarten through 12th grade Nebraska student to enroll and attend a school in a Nebraska public school district in which the student does not actually reside. This is subject to legally permissible standards, however. School boards adopt by resolution those specific standards for approval and denial of student applications to option into their districts. The school board of the option school district may, by resolution, declare a program, a class, or a school unavailable to option students if the school district is at capacity. The resolution for your consideration establishes capacity parameters for option enrollments into our district for the 23-24 school year. It identifies buildings and programs that are at capacity and therefore unavailable to option enrollments. One item that is different this year is that some seats will be available for option enrollments at our 2 high schools. At its retreat in August, this board discussed opening the high schools to option enrollments with the following parameters. 1, striving to maintain a balance of enrollment between the 2 high schools. Considering the impact of the internal transfer process when determining availability of option enrollments. Making decisions based on long-term impact and growth projections, and providing parents with as much choice as possible without overcrowding schools or increasing staffing. This resolution, ladies and gentlemen, meets those parameters. If the board passes this resolution, more information will be made available to families regarding both the internal transfer process and the option enrollment process for the 23-24 school year. With that, I'll yield now to any questions that you may have.
Dr. Steele, this becomes necessary for us really to talk about every year, correct? Because we could have changes in schools that have availability, grade levels that have availability, classes that have availability. So we really do need to review this every year. That is what ends up resulting in what we can open and what we feel we cannot. Because I think all of the things here, this priority list is really great, but it also requires that we aren't forced to increase staffing by allowing more in than we have the staff available to be able to do. So I appreciate we had a good thorough conversation about this in our committee, and I do appreciate the efforts that go into it because it's a lot of work projecting where these students are going to be coming from, in our own community and what grade levels they're moving into. So it's always it's a weighing and balancing act, but I appreciate the efforts that have gone into this because I know it's not easy as we watched all of those projections being placed up there for us to see. So the efforts of you and others that take place in getting this ready for us, I really appreciate the work.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher.
Dr. Steele, so this would just be, if we approve this would just be for the general guidelines of it, and then at some other board meeting, we would go through and approve the actual numbers potentially?
The numbers will be posted in terms of capacities, the buildings that are at capacities and so forth. If people have any questions about the specific numbers, they can contact our Student Services Office.
Gotcha. And how far in advance for the next school year do you have to set those of like what our projections would be of how many openings we would have at those schools? Well,
the process is going to be twofold. First of all, the first part of the process, we have the internal transfers. And that will have, this year as it has previously, it will have a February 1st deadline. After that process is complete, and incidentally, again, the board, you have made it a priority to really recognize the priority of those internal transfers. People that, at the high school level, people that live in our district, families that live in our district and want to send their student to another high school. That process will be February 1st. After that, then we'll have a solid understanding, a firm understanding of what the option numbers are going to look like, especially at the high school level. So.
If I can just elaborate on that a little bit too, besides the February and the March deadlines that we have, so right now is when we start rolling up students to the next year's projected numbers. So we've already looked at all of those numbers, and those were all taken into consideration with the recommendations that you're seeing. In addition, that helps us to start predicting staffing as well. So we'll have meetings next month with each principal to talk about staffing and sections and such in their specific schools. And that all just happens ahead of then the student portion of that.
And I think we talked about this at the August retreat, or about the current process for the internal transfers at the high school level was typically like one in, one out. And I believe this year or the previous couple of years, that had been the number of requests we got. So if that holds true, we wouldn't expect this updated plan to cause a huge wave going from one school to the other, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
It remains our goal to strive for balance in enrollment between the two schools.
Dr. Steele, over the last 10 years and probably longer, we have not really allowed option enrollment students at the high school level. Why the change now?
Well, I think we have an opportunity here before us. We do have some space available. Of course, you have to also balance that with the staffing parameters that we need to maintain as well. But we do have some space, and I think it can be an opportunity for us to have students from other areas of the metro to come in and learn alongside students who are from Papillion and La Vista. I think that can be very enriching for a learning environment.
And I think too, as construction is completed, and we are set to hopefully be completed at the high school level here in the upcoming month, right, Mr. Ryan? That's something that we've been talking about for the last few years. When we look at these numbers, is we will have some opportunity when that happens, and we want to make the best use of the resources that we have available. So this would help us to do that.
That's correct.
So this resolution, if adopted by the board, really just gives you all the option to allow option enrollment. I mean, we could take applications and not take anyone, correct?
Well, it depends on the interest out there, but it provides parameters, and as far as what buildings we will accept option enrollments from, and also guidelines in terms of capacity when it comes to programming as well. So,
very good. Thank you. Any other board comments, questions? All right, seeing none and seeing no public comment requested for this agenda item. Thank you, Dr. Steele.
Mr. President, thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, that concludes item D under section 4, discussion and information items. Moving on to item E, the 2021-22 Nebraska Department of Education academic update. Oh, we have a team. Ms. Siri, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, good evening, Board of Education. I am lucky enough tonight to be joined by Miss Angie Wright to my left. I told her I'd sit beside her so she could kick me if she needed to. She is our current Director of Assessment. And tonight we are going to share some information with you in the report form that was formerly known as the State of the Schools Report. A couple of things before we start. You may have saw the article in the Omaha World Herald that ran Wednesday night. This information has been embargoed by the Nebraska Department of Education until that time. What we are actually sharing with you tonight is the student achievement data and some additional information from last school year. That has a lot to do with the state assessment timeline, as well as the data has been scrubbed by the State Department, making sure that students that move between districts, those scores get transferred and so on. So it's always the following year that we get the information, and that information then is part of the state classification system. So that was also released on Wednesday. And so some of the things that we're going to share with you tonight is our district demographics as the state of Nebraska records it from our student enrollment data that was submitted last September, as well as our NSCAS scores, that's our state assessment, and the ACT graduation rate, and a couple of other factors or data points that we look at, including NWEA MAP, and that will all lead to our AQuest classification that you may have saw in the paper. So a couple of key takeaways before we dive in as far as what we are seeing in the data. We continue as a district to perform above the state and national average. Our graduation rate remains pretty steady and consistent, which we are very appreciative for, especially as we've recognized that we had a lot of teachers that had to do some heavy lifting through COVID, especially that spring year that we pushed out of school to ensure that our students got their credits for that graduation. The MAP assessment, the NWEA MAP assessment, continues to be a very useful tool for our teachers and our administrators as they look to ensure that all students are growing. And then, obviously, we always have room for improvement, and so there's a couple of opportunities here that we're going to talk about that you see in the data, as well as we continue to have high expectations as a district as we continue to focus on our strategic plan, including rigor. So this is the demographic data that is pulled right from the Nebraska Department of Education's website. It's called the NEP site. This is the information, like I said, that was submitted at the end of September. We share this with you because this is the data that they used to compare for all of the assessment data. So this is the same snapshot. So when they're talking about high ability learners, they're looking at that 8% of students that was designated at that time.
These are the results from NSCAS, which is the Nebraska Student-Centered Assessment System. Students in grades 3 through 8 take this assessment at one time per year in the spring. So this assessment data is from last spring. On this particular graph, the brighter color is Papillion-La Vista Community Schools, and the more faint color is the state of Nebraska. The categories that are listed at the top, advanced and on track, all students who fall within those two categories are proficient on the assessment, and then those students are developing towards proficiency. So you can see on this graph, it's stacked there, so you can see all 100% of the students who took it in this spring, and then how students in Papillion-La Vista Community Schools compare to this performance of students in the state of Nebraska. And one big takeaway is that Papillion-La Vista students overall are performing stronger than those in the state of Nebraska. This is a new test. The test was given operationally for the first time last year, and new cut scores have not yet been set. So the cut scores that are applied to this assessment were actually set based on the old test. The Nebraska Department of Education has told us that they will be running cut score setting processes this summer for both language arts and math. And so we hope that those cut scores better reflect the actual assessment that students are taking.
And NSCAS is for grades 3 through 8. So that's why you see 3rd grade through 8th grade, and this is English Language Arts.
The next graph is mathematics. The graph, you read it the same way. These are the results from the math test. Again, students in grades 3 through 8 take this test. These are students who were 3rd through 8th graders last school year, so 4th through 9th graders this year. And again, those percentages in the performance categories. And again, Papillion-La Vista students are outperforming their peers across the state. So we are proud of them for that and the hard work of the teachers. And then the final graph are the science results. The science results, you might look and think these results look different than English Language Arts or math. They set new cut scores for the new science test this summer. So these cut scores that are used on this assessment are based on the assessment that students are taking. So that's why you see a difference in the results.
Before we move on, I think you guys are doing a terrific job. I think for our members of the audience and people perhaps at home that are listening, if you're not familiar with the term cut score, Ms. Wright, Ms. Siri, could you just briefly explain what a cut score signifies?
Sure. The cut score is basically the score that a student must score on the assessment in order to show that they are proficient, that they're learning at the level expected based on the standards and based on the grade level expectations. Sometimes we hear about a normal curve where where students are distributed evenly. On a criterion reference test like the NSCAS, all students can pass, they just have to hit that minimum proficiency level. And then the reason you see the advanced category is the state has also set a cut score to show where students begin to perform above grade level expectations.
So for example, the PLCS 5th grade stacked bar, there's actually 2 cuts. There's a cut between developing and on track, yellow and green, and then there's another cut score between on track and advanced. So one way of interpreting the data, correct me if I'm wrong, is that 81% of PLCS 5th graders hit the cut score. They were either on track or advanced. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
That is accurate.
Great explanation, ladies. Thank you.
2 benchmarks.
Yeah, and I guess while you're talking about that,
Sure.
before we get to the end, can you talk about the difficulty with a new test, how to even come up with the cut score? Because you don't have any prior years that you can use the information to determine, like, okay, where could that have been if we track those students?
Yep.
How do they set them with no previous data?
Marcus, that's a great question. It's like you're a numbers guy. Yes, absolutely. So to set those benchmarks or those thresholds, you have to have data, obviously. And so we did participate in a pilot and a pre-pilot of this test, and then COVID hit. And so that did kind of derail part of the process. Science standards were adopted later, and that test was developed a little bit later. And so last year they did run that cut score process. And it's only 2 grade levels, so it's much easier to turn that around. This summer, they are going to set English Language Arts and math based on the data that you're seeing here tonight. And so they will use that information to help set those benchmarks.
This graph reflects the NSCAS ACT. So NSCAS ACT is taken by the 3rd year cohort. Most of the students in the 3rd year cohort are juniors. There are some exceptions to that rule, but most of them are juniors. You see the gap in the line because that's the 1920 school year, and I don't think I have to remind you that we were out in the spring of 20, so students did not take the ACT at that time. But you can see the yellow line is Papillion-La Vista Community Schools. The red is the average composite score for the state of Nebraska over time. So there is a dip after COVID, as we would expect. The state also took that dip, and so we have been talking about reasons that might be. Part of that is access to ACT prep coursework. There were fewer opportunities for students to take the ACT prior to their junior ACT, so that multiple testing sessions impacts student scores. And then COVID just just COVID and being out of school. So that's what that looks like. But we continue, our juniors are outperforming their peers across the state.
And this is the exam that we take in April. And so the English score on the 11th grade state ACT works the same way as a Saturday ACT, but it's configured a little bit differently because they mesh the two scores together to come up with the English language arts score.
And on the next chart, you'll see that it's ELA, which is the English language arts, and then math and science. And this chart shows over time percent proficient in each of those categories by Papillion La Vista students and then the students across the state of Nebraska.
So ELA is the combination of that language test and that reading test. Sorry, I thought you had a question. Sorry.
With COVID, we know a number of the universities changed their enrollment or their application criteria and maybe cut down the importance of the ACT testing. How many of what sort of drop have we seen for the juniors that are signing up to take the ACT test?
Would you ask that one more time?
The juniors that are taking, do we see the students, are they signing up less to take the ACT test?
Okay. Well, I would say that we're seeing that number return.
Okay.
It's coming back. I mean, it definitely stopped for a while, and I think part of that was colleges they didn't require it.
Yeah.
They're kind of moving back to it, and a lot of scholarships require it. So that's also part of it. Even though it may not be a required reportable score for the institution that you're going to, it's likely to have implications for scholarships and other things. So I would say it's returning. I know our ACT prep numbers are back up where they were before COVID.
Gotcha, yeah. And then because I was thinking you were talking about the drop in scores, and while someone was probably still taking the ACT, maybe they didn't take it as many times. They didn't take it to 2 or 3 to try to improve their score if it didn't matter as much, or they weren't doing the ACT prep. So yeah, if those preps are, if those enrollment numbers are getting back up, it'll be interesting to see how this number trends as it continues.
Yeah, and I will tell you that I think at the high school level, specifically math is probably the area that we saw the dip the greatest from the COVID. Part of that had to do with that spring quarter that we pushed out. That was hard to regain that math time that we lost, and math sequentially builds. And we really see that when you break down the ACT. It's the math part where we have slipped a little bit. So.
Shireen and Angie, before you leave ACT, what gets lost in the doom and gloom of the national and even the local media, I think there's 2 real important takeaways. One, Papillion La Vista Community Schools consistently outranks the state of Nebraska in terms of our performance, not only in aggregate but across the subtests. But I think most importantly, I believe there are 17 states in the union that administer the ACT to all, Nebraska being one of them. Of those 17 states that administer the ACT to all students, Nebraska ranks 2nd in the country behind the state of Utah. That's noteworthy, and that's something that our taxpayers and our community needs to understand, that our students are doing better than average locally, and compared to the rest of the country, we're doing exceptionally well.
Yeah. And I need to look this up. I was telling Angie tonight as we were getting ready for this, the first time that we took the ACT required by our juniors, 64% of that junior class, it was the first time they had taken the ACT. What a great gift to be able to take that on behalf of the state of Nebraska and not have to pay for it and have that experience. But I am curious now after COVID, I'd like to go back and we're going to recalculate it to see what is that number now, and has it gone up or down, and how many of those students. We do watch how many of our students participate in our ACT prep course. And then what that result is, but that includes Saturday ACT. We don't specifically hone in on just the junior ACT, and I think that would be good information for us to look at. So the other piece that I wanted to share with you is this is last year's information as well. So this is our Access Your Future information. Again, this would include our academies. This is really about internships and experiences that students have as part of that transition beyond high school. You can see that our workplace experience, that's like our Health Systems Academy, our Education Academy, the athletic training, and the zoo. We had 205 students participate in those programs. And the industry, which is like CNA and CMA, our OSHA training, we had 246. And overhaul, we had 763 students participate in an academy. That includes the STEM Academy and the 11 total. So I do think that that's a really good thing to note, especially as we get to the classification here at NDE. That CTE experience, that pathway, it is all-inclusive. It's not just college, but it's also career experience and career exposure, which again has been a strong philosophy of Papillion La Vista Schools for a long time, and I really believe part of our secret sauce. Wrong clicker, wrong computer. So this is our graduation rates. You can see 2022, again, it's previous year, so it's last spring. You can see we graduated 899 students between our two schools. We have a graduation rate at 94.8, again, higher than the state. Thank goodness. We continue to have high expectation of our students, and this really is all-inclusive because, again, if you wouldn't happen to graduate within your four-year cohort, just like all high schools in the state of Nebraska, you have a fifth year to continue to earn credits towards that diploma. So, anything I forgot there? Mm-mm. So, in comparison, the NWEA MAP test is an assessment that we use locally. It is a growth assessment. We started it with a phased implementation in 16-17. We actually went full forward with full implementation in the 18-19 school year, did it for 1 year, and then 19-20 was disrupted. But MAP is an adaptive assessment. It really does measure growth. The difference between MAP and, say, like NSCAS or a Terra Nova, if you're more familiar with it, is MAP really does tell a teacher or what a student knows, not what they should know. So the advantage there is you can really get a clear measurement. Is the student continuing to grow? Are there areas of concern that perhaps an intervention is needed, or other considerations? So it's a really powerful tool. The areas that we test in are reading and math. Language usage is a third test. It is used at the building level. It kind of depends on the grade level and the building, how they're using the data. K-3, you can see how often they take it. The reading bill impacts kindergarten through third grade. So it is outlined in state law that it has to be taken within the first 30 days of the school year and how many times. So they do participate in 3 times as we meet that law with this assessment. And then you can see on the next few slides here the comparison of MAP to last school year.
These results are from the MAP Growth Reading Assessment this fall. While we're looking at data from last year, this data is the most all-inclusive data that we have. And what I like about looking at fall data is that it not only includes impacts of learning from last year, but also summer school and all of those things that happen over that time as well. So, excuse me, this is also a stacked bar, so think of it similarly to those NSCAS graphs that we looked at earlier. The blue is the 80th to the 99th percentile, and the green is 61st to 80th, and then the yellow is 41st to 60th percentile, 21st to 40th, and 1st to 20th percentile in the red at the bottom there. So you can see the percent of students that are performing in each level. As Shireen talked about, this is a growth assessment. So this is a baseline for this year. One thing that is very beneficial about MAP data is that students take this assessment in the fall. They also take it again in the winter. So students or teachers and students can see how much growth they made over that time. Teachers are setting goals with students about how much learning they want to do. They're helping students understand what they're ready to learn now and using this as a good information for students, but also for their planning purposes in their classroom, and then also as a part of the continuous improvement process. So it's really informative for our principals and our teachers and our students to help make the most of the time that students have in the classroom and learn as much as they can. These are the reading results, and then these are the math results. And they're both used similarly in that continuous improvement process and in the classroom.
Another thing that's worth mentioning is MAP. Sorry, I think I cut you off, Skip. MAP, teachers have access to these results within 24 hours. It's actually almost immediately. But 24 hours for certain if there's a rostering issue. But so we're not waiting for an entire year before we get the scores. So that's one of the reasons that it's very helpful, is because it's timely. And a teacher can utilize it to see how that student's doing and then take corrective measures if necessary.
I'll say this the right way. Is there, like, before we had, those were in the NSCAS, you had, those, you have to hit a certain level to be proficient or achieving or whatever you want to call it. Are we looking for something similar in that, or are we just strictly looking at growth? So in other words, if I start down in the 11 and down in the red, as long as I go up to the orange, am I good to go, or are we trying to get all of our students to a certain?
Great question. So 50th percentile would be average, right in the middle. If we were to look at the norm group, so how the norm group over the nation would perform, what their bar graph would look like, it would be 20% of the students in each of those 5 categories. So that's what the norm would look like. So we're looking to outperform that as a whole. Students receive and teachers receive for students not only their percentile rank, which is represented here, but they also receive a score called a RIT score. And that score is much like if you think about your height, when you're growing, you're always looking for your child to be growing taller. That tells you that they're staying on that normal curve, they're growing as they're supposed to. A RIT score works very much the same. Over time, that RIT score needs to go up so that you're continuing to grow in your learning process.
So all of this leads to our AQuest score. AQuest, if you recall, is the classification system that the Nebraska Department of Education uses to give a ranking or status to each of the school districts. You can see here that, again, for last school year, Papillion-La Vista was ranked great. The factors that go into this AQuest classification are pictured here. The first one is the last time that it was given was 2018. It was to be reclassified in 2019, and then due to COVID and not taking the spring assessment, they were unable to do it. So they froze classification status until this year. But the first place that they start is the classification, the NSCAS classification. So you can see that assessment and achievement is a large part of this. So that's one of the reasons why we have a classification again, because we took the state test again. Along with that, consideration is the educational opportunities quadrant. That includes chronic absenteeism, our EL students and their progression towards mastery of the English language. Transition, it's also part of that consideration, the graduation rate, as well as the 7-year graduation rate for those students that take more than 4 years. And then the last part is that student achievement and growth. So did you see growth within the student achievement? Those are the factors that are utilized in that formula that gave us that great status. We were also great in 2018. Each of our schools do receive a status as well as designations for subgroups in their performance. So a subgroup is like special education, EL. All of that information can be found on the NEP website on NDE. You can look up any district or any school in the state of Nebraska and see that information if you're interested. The last thing that I just want to mention is obviously all of this is in consideration for us as we write our ideal goals. For this current school year, you've already seen these once, but obviously we continue to monitor and strive to address that academic learning loss as we're coming off of COVID and getting back in full swing. And then obviously it ties really nicely to our strategic plan, as especially the first target as we're trying to provide all students with a guaranteed rigorous curriculum. These are all data points that we utilize to make sure that we're making progress there and we're hitting that target. And so what can we expect moving forward from this information? We captured a few things here. Obviously, we're going to continue to evaluate academic achievement. This is one data point. We know we have stability in MAP. So even though the state test was new this year in full development, we have MAP as a consistent indicator, so that's kind of nice, as well as ACT. ACT obviously has been around a long time. We have a lot of good information there to help us with our high school performance. We know that the state test is going to continue to change. They're continually piloting questions. They're trying to get that assessment stronger. We know that the testing windows will likely be modified this next school year, that's likely coming. And it will continue to be in grades 3 through 8. We are going to monitor the chronic absenteeism. We did see an increase there. Part of that is COVID, students being out, quarantined, but we have, we've seen quite an increase of the number of students that's missed 10% or more of those days. That's a little concerning for us. We're watching it. We're talking about what we can do as a district because obviously in order for a student to be successful academically, they need to be in school. And so we are talking through that, and I know that Student Services has been monitoring that as well. We'll continue to see fluctuation in the AQUES classification. You have all been informed about the evidence-based assessment, the EBA. They didn't use it, then COVID hit, and they did use it. So we know that NDE will continue to modify that system as well. And I think the two big ones for us, moving forward, having the district data warehouse will be huge, having Otis, getting that accessible information in our teachers' hands sooner and more easily managed for them to look at and utilize is important. And then the last thing is we'll continue with the strategic plan implementation, and that will also continue to have an impact. And that is it for last year's NDE student achievement information. Questions that you have or clarification?
I just have a question. As we're looking at all these different methods of testing our students, are we testing all students, no matter what their classification may be, on all of these tests currently? Because I know there's been some conversation about how we could see challenges maybe at this school with special education or this school with that, but we're testing all students equally across all of these measurements, correct?
Yes, that is correct. The state test does test all students in those grades except for the 1% of students that are on the alternate assessment. And those are students that are not on they're on a modified curriculum. And so that it would not be an appropriate assessment for them. But that's less than 1%. That's about 1% of our population. The only other assessment that is different when we talk about the state test is the ELPA. Our EL students not only participate in this, but they also participate in the ELPA for language proficiency. And that's a constant transitioning program because those students test out of that, or we hope that they test out of it.
That's the goal.
Yeah. So, yep.
Lots of great data. As an elementary school parent, the MAP tests are phenomenal. They really help not only the teachers, but also the parents get that instant feedback on how they're doing with growth, and it really sets it in early for students to set goals and what is achievable, and to say, hey, I just did a couple more questions better, but I get to see that growth. It's really nice and simple for them, to understand as well. So I enjoy that it's given as often as it is, so we can address concerns as a parent as well.
Great. That's good feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, no further comments or discussion from the board, and no public comment over item E. We'll conclude item E. Before we move on to item F, as there's a potential for a closed session, I will quickly move on to Section 5, the future board calendar. December 2nd, 2022, a liaison lunch at Papillion Middle School with Mr. Madler. December 5th, 2022, a liaison lunch at Golden Hills with Mr. Bailey. December 6th, 2022, a liaison lunch at Papillion La Vista High School with myself. And December 12th, 2022, the next Board of Education meeting at 6 p.m. here at the central office. All right, moving on back to item F under Section 4, discussion information items.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session to protect the public interest and to protect the reputation of individuals for the purpose of discussing employee negotiations.
All right, I have a motion by Ms. Fisher and a second by Mr. Bailey. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 All right, thank you all. With that, the board will move into a closed session for the purpose of discussing employee negotiations. I'll ask our visiting public to please exit. Board members, we will take a 5-minute recess in order to clear the room and prep for closed session. We will return for closed session at 7:46 p.m.